everybody. I'm Jessica and I teach 7th grade language arts. And today I'm going to tell you 10 questions that you should expect when you interview for a middle school English position. Or really, I guess it could be English or high school, and many of these are going to apply to elementary as well. So let's just call this 10 interview questions that you might experience at a teacher interview. There's going to be a lot of questions, so I have put in the show notes the different questions. If you just want to skip to a specific question, the timestamps are in the description. All right, the first and most obvious question that they are going to ask you is to tell me a little bit about yourself. This is your chance to tell them anything you want them to know about yourself. You're going to tell them usually where you graduated from college. You might even tell them if you're from the area, if you went to a school nearby, you could tell them that. Try to keep all your answers related to education or your experience with teaching. You can tell them if you're married, you don't have to. You can tell them if you have kids, you don't have to. They might ask you that, and then it would be kind of awkward if you didn't respond. But just remember that you don't have to answer those questions. But in a situation where you're being interviewed, it's gonna feel a little like, oh, you don't wanna tell me if you're married? Oh, you're going to not tell me how many kids you have? So just be prepared to disclose that information because they are gonna wanna know. Certainly inappropriate if they ask you something like, do you plan on having any more kids, or do you plan on having kids? Do you plan on starting a family? I think those questions are inappropriate to ask in an interview, but just know that you may hear those questions, and so decide how you're going to answer them if you are asked those questions. But for the tell me about yourself question, just give them any general knowledge and already have in your mind what you're going to say when they say, tell me a little bit about yourself. Question number 2 that you might hear is, what is your teaching style? They're going to want to know how familiar you are with the most current modern teaching styles. Do you know what personalized learning is? Are you going to be using that? Do you work mostly whole group, small group? Are you going to do small group instruction at a small group table? Are you going to do a lot of collaborative group work assignments? Do you know what inquiry is? Are you going to be doing a lot of inquiry teaching styles? And if you're fresh out of college, you should know all the most current modern things. But just be prepared to throw out big words or throw out current jargon, because that's what they're listening for when they ask you this question. If you say, I'm really familiar with personalized learning and I plan on implementing that, or I'm really familiar with inquiry, they're really going to like that, okay? So they want to know if you're familiar with the teaching styles and the most modern current ones, and then they're going to want to know how you plan on using that in your classroom. Question number 3 they're probably going to ask you is, do you have any experience working with kids? Do you have any experience working with students or kids that are in the age range of whatever school you're applying at? So you're definitely going to want to talk about your student teaching. If you were a teacher cadet in high school, did you do practicums in college, and then your student teaching experience? They're going to want to hear that. Just tell them, oh, I did my practicum at this school, and I always go over to this school and help out. And even if you like just babysit all the time or have experience with children, this is your time to just say, oh yeah, I'm around kids all the time. I teach after school tutoring. I mean, don't lie. If you do teach after school tutoring, that's going to be really good. It'll boost you up, okay? But just know they're going to ask you about experience and how comfortable are you around this age of children that they're, interviewing you for. Number 4 is more of a difficult question. They might ask you, how do you plan on handling behavior? What are your classroom management skills? Especially if you are new, young, they're going to worry about the kids running over you. Because I'm gonna tell you, if you don't already know, the kids nowadays, you're gonna have to have some tough classroom management skills. Okay, so really buckle up on all the terminology when it comes to that, and be prepared to answer them when they ask you if there's a problem in your classroom. If you have a student who's misbehaving, how do you plan on, what are some classroom management strategies that you already know that you plan on using? So make sure you have some that you're going to say. If you want to say like incentives, PBIS, and one thing that I definitely would give you a tip as to say this, because it's modern and they're going to like this. If you talk about nonviolent communication strategies, there is a book written by Mark Rosenberg, and it's all about nonviolent communication strategies. Chances are they're familiar with that, and even if they're not, you're going to sound very intelligent and like you have a plan, because you're going to use nonviolent communication. Or even if you use PBIS, you have a plan, you're going to use PBIS. Don't get in there and just say, oh, I'm going to, I'm just going to follow the behavior guidelines and don't let this question catch you unaware, because behavior right now is really important issue in schools because of, I don't know, the kids are just so bad right now, and they don't want to throw you in there and thinking, oh my God, the kids, especially middle school, high school, the kids are going to run all over this chick. And make sure you have an answer to how do you plan on handling classroom management. The next question you might hear in a teacher interview is, how do you plan on monitoring whether or not your students are understanding what you're teaching? This question could be asked a lot of different ways. How are you going to monitor? How are you going to know that the students are understanding what you're teaching? So this is the question when they're asking about, do you know how to analyze data? They want to know that you know what formative assessments are, you know what summative assessments are, and when you teach them something, when you teach the students something, you as a teacher are going to know how to monitor and how to analyze the data as to whether they understood what you just taught them. So you're going to want to say things like, I plan on giving formative assessments like exit tickets and blah, 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 blah. And I plan on, analyzing their summative assessments, big unit tests, and I also plan on monitoring high stakes testing. Like here we have South Carolina Ready, South Carolina Pass, and at my school we use MAP assessment. So, MAP, MAP. If you know some of the tests already and you know the names of the tests, that's when they want to hear this. They want to hear that you are going to teach, assess, monitor that assessment, look at the data, how did the students do on that assessment, and then if they did poorly, they want to hear you say, if I see that my students did poorly, I will go back and reteach. That's what they want to hear, okay? They want to hear that you know about assessments, you know about looking at the data, and you know that if they didn't, if you see that your students didn't understand, something is wrong, you're not just going to keep teaching, you're going to go back and reteach, at least to the students that didn't get it, and even say, I plan on pulling the students who didn't score, a good score. I plan on pulling them in small groups and reteaching them. That's what they want to hear. I think number 6 is the most difficult one because it's so specific, and you really are going to want to plan your answer ahead of time for this one. But number 6 is the questions when they ask, tell me a time when, and then they might say anything. Tell me a time when you taught a lesson and it didn't go right. What did you do? Tell me a time when you gave a test and the students all bombed it, and what did you do? Tell me a time when a student was really bad, their behavior was really bad. What did you do? So just think about any experience you have, especially very specific stories you can tell, because they're going to want you to tell them a story. They're going to want you to tell them a story. Well, oh yeah, one time I I taught this lesson and everything just went wrong, so I monitored and adjusted. That's a good term to use. But just go back in any experience that you have and any specific stories of success that you can remember and that you can tell. Make it seem like I just thought of this story off the top of my head, but really you thought about, they're going to ask me about tell them a story or to talk and feel comfortable. So I'm going to act like I just came up with this story off the top of my head, but I've been thinking and I've already planned on telling this specific story, because they're going to want you to, spin them a yarn of a time where you faced a difficulty and you overcame the difficulty. Number 7 is a question where they might ask you about relationship building. They might ask you, how are you going to build relationships with your students? And again, I think now is a good time to throw out that nonviolent communication, because you talk about feelings and emotions with your students, and that's really good at building relationships with them. This is the time where they want to not hear you mess up, because if you say something like be their friend or share personal stories with them, don't say things like that, okay? Because you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that, and they don't want to hear that you're going to do that. You're definitely not going to be their friend on Instagram. You're definitely not going to follow them on TikTok, okay? That's not what they want to hear. How are you going to build relationships with them? So you want to say something like, I'm going to listen. I'm going to, be an active listener and respond to every student. I'm going to let them know that I'm human. I'm going to show them that it's okay not to be perfect and build relationships with them. If they have questions, making them feel comfortable, asking me questions. And here's where you want to throw out that keyword, safe classroom environment. You want to say that I want to build a safe classroom environment in my classroom and make my students feel safe. I'm not going to put up with any bullying. I'm going to, listen and value the students' opinions, value what the students say, let them know how I feel. Don't tell them you're going to let them know all about your personal life, because you're not going to do that. You don't want to do that. But let them know that you plan on creating a safe classroom environment for your students. Number 8 is, I think, kind of a toxic question that gets asked in a lot of teacher interviews. A lot of interviews, and it's about the word family, okay? I've heard this question asked to me before, and I just didn't like it. But they might ask you, they might say, our school is a family. Our school has a really strong family. Our teachers are like a family. And they're going to ask you, how do you plan on contributing to our family? How do you plan on fitting in and contributing to our school faculty family? Okay, well, number 1, it shouldn't be a family. It's a workplace, okay? And I feel like that's a toxic way to make teachers feel guilty for not killing themselves and working so much overtime and volunteering to do all these things, because you want to contribute to the family, right? And if you're not, then you should feel guilty. I just don't like that question at all, but you have a very high chance of hearing that question. So if you hear the question, how do you plan on contributing to our school's family? Just say, I say don't lie. We're not going to lie. Say that you plan on using, again, nonviolent communication with the teachers as well as the students. You plan on building good learning relationships and good working relationships with your grade level teachers and your subject area teachers, okay? Say that, having relationships with my fellow teachers is just as important as having good relationships with my students, and I plan on sharing and contributing to the learning community and, offering up research, volunteering to do research, or volunteering to analyze data. So if you don't mind saying that you love volunteering for sports, throw that out there. If you say you don't mind volunteering for clubs, after school clubs, throw that out there. Now, if you do have a problem with that, don't say it. If you don't like sports and you're not interested in doing after school clubs, don't lie and say you are and then get hired and they expect you to do it and you be like, nah, no, okay? So just be prepared to answer a question about how do you plan on contributing to the family atmosphere or family environment of the school. How do you plan on fitting into the family? I hate that question, but you're probably going to be asked that question. All right, the last two questions go hand in hand, okay? 9 and 10. I hope they wouldn't ask you this, but they're probably going to ask you this. What is your greatest strength and what is your greatest weakness? Okay, those are the last two questions I'm going to talk about. They're going to ask you just the generic because they want to hear what you say. And when you say your greatest strength, I want you to think about it beforehand. If you're really good at a specific thing as far as teaching, you need to, think about what you're going to say and answer a good one. Say, like for me, I would say I'm really good at technology. I'm really good at anything technology related. I can make really awesome videos for my kids. Screencastify I'm familiar with. The Google Suite I'm familiar with. If you can say that you're really good at technology, that's a big plus because a lot of the older teachers in the building are not good with technology and they need you, a younger person who knows a lot about technology, to help them. So if you're really good at technology, throw that out there. If you don't want to use technology, you could use something like, I'm really good at small group instruction. I think that's one of my strengths because I love getting just 4 or 5 students, sitting with them and working one-on-one time with them. And I think that's where I really excel. If you, anything, you want to pick out a strength. And for me, I think a safe, easy, good strength is to say that you're good at technology because they need that in schools. The last one is the greatest weakness. Do not say that you don't have a weakness. That's a load of crap and they know it and they don't want to hear you say that you don't have I don't really know if I have a weakness. I can't think of a weakness. Come up with a weakness, okay? That's what they want. They want to hear you admit that you have a weakness and make it a safe weakness and say that you plan on working on the weakness. So if I was asked that question, I would say that one of my greatest weaknesses might be timing, okay? Planning a 90-minute lesson and my pacing. Feel like, one of my weaknesses, I feel like I'm a little weak in my pacing. If I have a 90-minute lesson to plan for, I always plan too much and it goes over. And I really have to I have to set timers and I really have to make myself focus on my pacing, okay? Don't say that you have a problem with pacing and you don't plan enough. Say you have a problem with pacing and you plan too much, okay? Or you could say something like, I have trouble when I'm planning a lesson and the technology component. Sometimes I feel like I plan too much technology and I want to focus on bringing it back to the basics, doing more paper and pencil collaborative work. And now that computers are so easily accessible and I can just assign everything on the Google Classroom, but I feel like that's a weakness because I don't want to rely on it so heavily and I'm planning on working on that. I'm planning on not assigning so much on the computer. They like that. That's a good weakness, okay? But please just don't say that you don't have a weakness because that's not true. Don't say that classroom management is a weakness. Don't say it. That's a red flag, okay? It probably is the top weakness of most teachers, but don't say that it's your weakness. Okay. All right, you guys, that was 10 questions that you might hear in an English teacher interview. Really just any teacher interview. I don't know why I called it an English teacher interview. I think it's just because I'm an English teacher, so it could be any teacher interview and really any grade level. Those are 10 good questions to prepare answers for before you walk into an interview. All right, you guys. So thank you so much for watching my video. Especially if you watched it all the way through, please leave me a like. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Leave a comment. Let me know what kind of video I should make next. And thank you all for just all the support you give me all the time. I'll see you next time.